Why did you call the police on me? Get out. Leave my room. Call 911. She's got a knife. I didn't help her. I could have saved her. I could have called somebody. I ask you to remember those statements as you deliberate your verdict. But ladies and gentlemen, I also want to tell you before we go any farther that I want to thank you. You came forward when you were called to serve. You've performed your duty. You've given us precious time away from your family. You've given us the time away from your friends and your responsibilities. And on behalf of the state of Tennessee, I want to thank you. This has been a long 4 days of proof. You have heard from 47 witnesses, and you have seen around 200 exhibits. The judge has instructed you on the law, and it is now your time to decide what the evidence proves, your time to decide the importance of each witness, and your time to decide what justice in this case requires. You will decide, did Shanterrica Madden intentionally and with premeditation kill Tina Stewart? And you will decide whether Shanterrica Madden is guilty of tampering with evidence. In making your decision, I recommend to you a three-step process. Step number one, follow the court's instructions, weigh and assess all of the evidence, and by weighing and assessing the evidence, you're going to develop a set of facts that you believe to be true. And you will use those facts and you will learn to rely upon them in making your decision. Step two, take the law that Judge Ash has given you throughout the trial, and most importantly, the law regarding first-degree murder and destruction of evidence, and apply the law to the evidence and the facts. And then step three, decide whether the state has proven beyond a reasonable doubt the guilt of Shanterrica Madden, her guilt as to first-degree murder, and her guilt as to tampering with evidence. The judge's instructions may suggest that you list issues. So what are the issues? 1, venue. 2, identity. And 3, all of the elements of the crimes charged. There is one thing that I really want to stress to all of you, and I want you to keep it foremost in your mind during all your deliberations. Do not abandon your common sense. Do not feel that because you're in a courtroom that common sense does not apply. It does apply, and you should use it. Use it throughout all of your deliberations. It's easy to get caught up in confusion. The confusion of the what ifs and is it possible? What if this could have happened? What if that could have happened? Is it possible that this happened? Is it possible that that happened? These are legitimate questions. Some make sense. Some do not. It is your common sense that will help you separate the true from the untrue, the fact from the speculation, the evidence that sheds light on the truth from the evidence that hides the truth, and most importantly, the common sense from the nonsense. When you are making your decision, I want you to ask yourself and your fellow jurors, does that make sense? Does that fit? I want you to also remember, it is not your duty to be an investigator. It is your duty to act as 12 independent judges, judges of the facts and following the court's instructions, judges of the law. Your duty is to seek the truth and to judge the case fairly and honestly, without prejudice or sympathy for either side. In making your decision, you must decide whether or not the state has proven what the law requires. And let's look at what the state has to prove. Number one, venue, which means did the crime occur in this county? Venue is not an issue in this case. The crime occurred in Rutherford County. Two, the identity of the person who committed the crime. The identity of the person who committed this crime is not an issue. No one disputes that Shanterrica Madden is the person who killed Tina Stewart. Three, the elements of the crime. And let's look now at the two elements of first-degree murder. First-degree murder is the intentional and premeditated killing of another. The elements are, one, that the killing was intentional, and two, that the killing was premeditated. Let me address those questions for you. One, that the killing was intentional. How do you determine intent? I submit that intent can be deduced or inferred from the character of the assault, what type of assault it was, the nature of the act, and from all the circumstances in this case. Consider this. Tina Stewart was stabbed multiple times. This was not an accident. And when Shanterrica Madden stabbed Tina Stewart, she was doing what she made the decision to do. It was an act designed to accomplish a result. She intentionally used a knife. She intentionally stabbed Tina Stewart to death. She intentionally allowed Tina Stewart to bleed to death. Using your common sense, if it wasn't her intention to stab Tina Stewart, why didn't she call 911? Why didn't she try to get medical help? And maybe even more revealing, why did she conceal the evidence and keep other people from helping her? Remember, she testified Saturday, and she said, "I didn't help her. I could have saved her. I could have called somebody." It is clear that the acts of Shanterrica Madden were intentional. Now, the final element of premeditated murder is that the killing was premeditated. Premeditation means that you form the intent to kill, and it must be formed prior to the act itself. It is not necessary that the purpose to kill pre-exist in the mind of the accused for any definite period of time, and as the judges instruct you, it is sufficient that it preceded the act, however short the interval, as long as it was the result of reflection and judgment. Before I talk to you about premeditation in this case, I want to make one thing clear, because I'm going to use an example. Shanterrica Madden is not credible. She tells falsehoods. She makes up imaginary people with dreadlocks. She lies to her mother. She lied to her father. She lied to Renee Reese. She lied to Casey Anuna. She lied to Officer Jensen. She lied to Detective Taylor. And when she testified Saturday, I submit that she lied to you. Shanterrica Madden will say and do anything to hide the truth. To hide the truth from the police and to hide it from you. I want you to compare her demeanor on the videotape March 2nd, 2011 with her demeanor last Saturday when she testified, both before lunch and after lunch. Dramatic differences. Using your common sense, you know what you are dealing with. Do not let her fool you. I submit further that no witness was more unbelievable than Shanterrica Madden. Ask yourself this as well. Why does she remember some things and not others? How does this model student who studies criminal justice and wants to be a lawyer suddenly and conveniently suffer from amnesia? I submit she does not want you to know the whole truth. It is too bad for her to tell, and it is too bad for you to hear. But let us assume that Miss Madden's second version, the one on March 2nd, is true. And I submit that a lot of it isn't. For one thing, I submit the knife was not in Tina Stewart's bedroom. Shanterrica Madden brought it there. But let's look at her version. The version is the one she told after she tried to blame the man with dreadlocks, if y'all remember. And after Detective Taylor suggested that if she were in a fight, and that if she stabbed her during this fight, it would be better to tell that story than the one with the dreadlocks. Remember that about the 12 jurors, and which one do you want them to consider? It is an effective interview technique. And it got Miss Madden to admit that she killed Tina Stewart. She took the bait, and she admitted she was the killer. And she said that it happened this way in her second story. After Jensen left, I went and knocked on the door. And when she unlocked it, we just argued right after that. She was watching TV, and she was texting because she was on the phone. I turned around and was heading to my room. And I think I kind of bumped into her. And she was like, "Don't bump into me." Now, Saturday, she changed that story. She said that she didn't bump into her. She said she made a mistake in memory. If it was a mistake in memory, then it must have also been another mistake in memory when she told Detective Taylor that Tina Stewart said, "Don't bump into me." She also told Detective Taylor that she shoved me and I shoved her back. And she had a knife setting, I think it was on the bed, and I grabbed that knife because she still had my head down and she was pounding me on my head. And I grabbed the knife and just kind of went like this. And I held it and I let it out and she fell. If this story is true, Miss Madden made a decision to take possession of the knife from wherever she got it. She made the decision to hold it up like this, and she made the decision to push it out like that. She also told you Saturday that stab wound, that first one we just described, was the first and only stab wound she remembers. It is the stab wound that hit Tina Stewart in the chest. She said, "I stabbed her and she fell. I stabbed her and she fell. And I reached out to grab her and I dropped the knife on the floor." Ladies and gentlemen, if that is true, she had to pick that knife back up off the floor. And while Tina Stewart lay on the floor, face down, remember her testimony? Face down, bleeding to death. Her aorta, the main artery to her heart, cut, and her lung pierced, gasping for every breath, with only minutes to live. Shanterrica Madden picked that knife back up, and she went after Tina Stewart. And she caused more injuries. She cut Tina Stewart's arm, but she did even more. She stabbed Tina Stewart in the back, in the upper left shoulder area. And she also stabbed Tina Stewart in the back of her head. Consider all of this when you decide whether Shanterrica Madden had formed the intent to kill prior to doing the acts that killed Tina Stewart. And ask yourself and your other jurors, if she hadn't formed the intent to kill Tina Stewart before she finished doing all that she did, why come back and check and see if Tina Stewart is dead? Why find out if Tina Stewart is still breathing? Ask yourself, why didn't she simply call for help? And ask yourself, why did she take those steps that prevented others from helping? Remember her words. I didn't help her. I could have saved her. I could have called somebody. Multiple stab wounds to an unarmed person. And all of the stab wounds are in the upper body. None to the legs, none to the lower body. I submit to you that Shanterrica Madden had formed the intent to kill Tina Stewart, and she had formed that intent prior to doing those acts. Shanterrica Madden acted intentionally and with premeditation, and that is why this is murder in the first degree. Let me address self-defense. I was in pain. My eye was hurting. My body was sore. That is what Miss Madden said were her injuries on the stand Saturday before she stabbed and killed Tina Stewart. Remember that testimony when you consider self-defense. And the judge will tell you, or has already told you, that the threat or use of force against another is not justified if the person using force consented to the exact force used or attempted by another. They both were fighting. They both were punching. That's called consent. 2, if the person using the force, provoked the other's individual use or attempted use of the unlawful force, the person using force abandons the encounter or clearly communicates to the other the intent to do so, and the other person nevertheless continues or attempts to use unlawful force. Tina Stewart never, at any time, used unlawful force. Remember her testimony, Miss Madden's testimony? She said that she had been pushed out of the room. She made the decision to come back in and fight. This was mutual combat. In all cases of self-defense, the force used must be reasonable. There should be no escalation. Think about it. You can get in a fight and you can shoot somebody because they hit you in the mouth. That's not self-defense. The test of reasonable belief is threefold. The defendant must reasonably believe to be threatened with imminent loss of life or serious bodily injury. There was no serious bodily injury. The danger creating the belief must be real or honestly believed to be real at the time of the action. And the belief must be founded on reasonable grounds. And the force must also be reasonable. Ladies and gentlemen, it cannot be excessive. If self-defense did not require that, if it didn't require reasonable fear, and if it didn't require reasonable force in response, it would allow any person in any fight to use deadly force. And in this case, the escalation of force was not justified, and self-defense does not apply. Further, I want you to consider this. Shanterrica Madden's actions are not consistent with someone who has just acted in self-defense. Consider what she did. Common sense will tell you that when you remember that immediately after the stabbing, Shanterrica Madden took steps to conceal her crime. To conceal her crime. She threw away the murder weapon. She threw away other knives that matched the murder weapon. She threw away Tina Stewart's jacket and her blanket, and she continues to prepare to leave. Tina Stewart is dead or dying, and instead of getting help, it is more important to Shanterrica Madden to get her laundry done, pack her bag, and get ready for spring break. That's the choices she made. And remember what she tells Renee Reese. You can't tell anybody anything. You can't tell anybody anything. Is that something someone would say who was acting in self-defense? And she also wants to know who Miss Reese has talked to. She acts with purpose and calmness. You saw the difference between her on the tape and the testimony of the witnesses and how she acted when she testified. March 2nd, 2011, she calls for someone to pick her up. She didn't render aid, never called 911. And she also took steps to prevent anybody else from calling or helping. She took Tina Stewart's cell phone, her lifeline, and took it away from her and put it in the living room where she couldn't use it. And after she took it, she did use it. Not to save Tina Stewart, but to make sure she died. She sent not one, but 2 false text messages. And then when Casey Anuna arrived, she lied and said, she's not there. The judge's instructions has told you what you consider when determining first-degree murder, whether the killing was intentional and whether the killing was premeditated. I submit to you that when you consider all the facts and all the circumstances of this case, you will find that this murder was intentional and this murder was premeditated and that the murder of Tina Stewart was murder in the first degree. Let's talk briefly about the Twitter messages. The state introduced the Twitter messages, and they were posted by Tina Stewart while she was waiting for the police and while the police were there and searching. Those were never heard, they were never spoken, and the court has instructed you that they are be used only for establishing a timeline, and that's their only purpose. Remember, I said they were never heard and never spoken. Now, let's move on from unspoken words to words that were spoken, words that were said, and words that were heard, and words that really and truly are the important words in this case. Why did you call the police on me? Shanterrica Madden's words. I didn't help her. I could have saved her. I could have called somebody. These are all what Shanterrica Madden said. Those are important words, and I want you to consider them. I want you also to look at some more important words. Get out. Leave my room. Words spoken by Tina Stewart. There can be no dispute whose room they're in. My room. Tina Stewart's room. And call 911. She's got a knife. Who was the only person, even from Miss Madden's testimony, that had a knife? Shanterrica Madden. She could only be Tina Stewart talking about Miss Madden's got the knife. Ladies and gentlemen, that tells you something. Then there were what I submit to you were the last words spoken by Tina Stewart. Stop. Stop. My heart's still beating. Miss Madden tried to make those words her, using your common sense. Those weren't her words. Those were the words of somebody who had been stabbed in the aorta, the artery leading to the heart. Those were the words that she said probably as she lay on the floor. What was she asking her to stop? Those other injuries that she got while she was laying on the floor, where Shanterrica Madden continued to stab her. Tina Stewart was a young lady, 21 years old. She was a college student. She was a basketball player, someone with a bright future. She was in love with the man that she planned to marry. She was a sister. She was a daughter. You have heard the defense tell you, if Miss Madden had committed this crime a few weeks earlier, she would have been 17. When you consider that, I want you to remember this. Tina Stewart was 21, and she will never, ever, ever be 22. There is nothing that we can do, or that you can do, or I can do, or anyone do, that can undo what was happened on March 2nd, 2011. Nothing will bring Tina Stewart back. This is an emotional case. The judge has told you that you can have no sympathy for either side as you reach your verdict. But there is one thing you can do, and that one thing is justice. You can do justice. And justice in this case is to find the truth. And the truth in this case is that Shanterrica Madden is guilty. She's guilty of murder in the first degree, and she's guilty of destruction of evidence. Thank you, Judge.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, what we'll do is we're going to take a 10-minute break, and I'll be back in 10 minutes.